Okay, well, thank you ever so much once again to everybody who's been waiting for this joint committee meeting. So first of all, can I welcome you all to the joint committee meeting? And I want to, first of all, start by welcoming Steve Bridger, who is the leader of North Somerset Council, which is his first meeting of the joint committee. So welcome, Steve. In addition to Steve, of course, we have my colleagues Kevin Guy from Bath and North East Somerset Council, Marvin Rees from Bristol City Council, and Toby Savage from South Gloucestershire Council, and Richard Bonner from the Local Enterprise Partnership, who is a non-voting member of the committee. And I'm Dan Norris from the West of England Combined Authority. So before we move on to the main agenda items, I'd just like to mention that some members of the public are joining this meeting to be present to present their statements. And please note that all the statements received by everybody who's put them in have been circulated and read by the committee members and are also available to view on the West of England Combined Authority website. Now, are there any apologies for absence? Clearly not, because people are all here. So the next item is item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest, please? No? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we move to item 4, the minutes of the previous meetings. The minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of April of this year have been circulated along with the meeting papers. Are members present happy, please, that these minutes be confirmed as a correct record of the meeting? And obviously, Steve, you weren't there, so this is a special exclusion for you. Is that agreed to be a correct record? Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate that. Item 5 is the Chair's announcements. I have no announcements to make today. Item 6 is items from the public. Now, this is for up to 30 minutes. Now, in terms of questions, 12 questions have been submitted for this meeting. And as usual, details have been circulated and written answers have been sent to the questioners. And these are also published on the Combined Authorities website alongside the agenda papers. And then we also have received 40, I think it's 44 now, I think it's gone up, yeah, 44 statements, 42 of which relate to the same subject, Thornbury High Street, and by my reckonings that's about 96% or something, which I think is probably a record. And as I mentioned earlier, we've made arrangements for some members of the public to join this meeting to present their statements in person where they have requested this. So up to 3 minutes per statement will be permitted today, and I'd be very grateful if the individuals who are making the statements could please summarise their points they wish to make as we have read all the statements, which are also published, as I said, on the website. So I'm going to call the speakers in turn. If I have missed somebody out, please hold your hand up at the end because I don't intend to miss anybody and there's an awful lot today who've put in and I want to make sure the ones who intend to speak today do exactly that. So the first person I have on my list is John Reynolds. John, are you here, please? Hello, John. Your 3 minutes is about to start and there's a microphone to help you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I shall concentrate today on the way in which you, Councillor Savage, and your fellow South Gloucestershire councillors have failed in your democratic duty to serve the community by imposing your unwanted and unworkable vision on Thornbury High Street. Consultation, Councillor Savage, is something carried out before action is taken. You don't consult with your surgeon while he is operating on you, and you don't consult with your builder about the layout of your house after he's already laid the foundations. You did not attempt to consult about the future of Thornbury High Street until after you had already crippled its trading economy and caused traffic congestion and reduced air quality with a road closure. And what about engagement with the public over your plans? Those meetings with focus and stakeholder groups, where are the published minutes of those meetings? Where are the concerns raised by participants and the reports back to Council for action and amendment? Where are the documented efforts by Council to find solutions and compromises? As we all know, Councillor Savage, your engagement meetings were a sham, a tick-box veneer, and that you never had any intention of finding an accord with the public. Your so-called consultation survey showed a majority calling for the High Street to be returned to its original form when COVID was passed. You ignored this. After your consultants had massaged the statistics you were still left with a rejection by a majority. Again, you ignored this. By so doing, you denied the existence of a democratically expressed opposition to your plans. As you did with the responses to the traffic regulation orders, 4 of the 5 orders were rejected overwhelmingly by the public, but your council adopted them all. On the eve of the parish poll, you finally sent Councillor Reid to Thornbury to answer previously submitted questions from the Town Council and the public, and what a disaster that was. The councillor just parroted the same words off his laptop that we'd all read before. Why did you not come instead, Councillor Savage? Were you scared? The democratically called, ordered and counted parish poll showed a 72% majority rejection of your High Street plan. And your response, Councillor Savage, total silence. Not surprising for someone who was elected with only 28% of the public vote. Finally, yesterday I received a reply from you to my email of the 7th of June. I am weary of hearing that you were born and bred and went to school in Thornbury, with which you start all your pronouncements. That might be relevant if you still lived there, but do you? You are the only South Gloss councillor who refuses to disclose his address. Why is that such a secret? And why was your reply to me made up from cut and paste text from emails which I'd already received, including from Councillor Reid? That is discourteous in the extreme, and convinces me more than ever that you have a horror of having to engage with the public. Democracy, Councillor, is a system in which everyone has equal rights and opportunities and can help make decisions. You have not permitted the people of Thornbury to make any decisions because you insist that you, a non-resident, think you know better than anyone else how Thornbury should look. Perhaps you should restrict yourself to explaining to this meeting why only your vision matters and why you have treated the people of Thornbury with total disdain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Lindsay Hall, is Lindsay here, please? Hiya. Lindsay, you've got your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak. £4.5 million. It's a lot of money. Might not seem much to you with £100 million budgets, but £4.5 million is a lot. We have many problems in this country crying out for some cash, and we're a bit broke. We had a massive financial crisis in 2008-9 and didn't really recover from that before COVID came along, prompting the government to spend eye-watering sums of money to keep people's livelihoods and the economy afloat. We now have war on the edge of Eastern Europe, inflation at 9% and rising, fuel at £2 a litre, and the biggest cost of living crisis since the 1970s. And I remember the 1970s. I don't recall anyone ever saying Thornbury High Street was one of those problems, before certain members of South Gloucestershire Council saw an opportunity to grab some cash, all taxpayers' money, for a pet project that initially had no consultation and has consistently disregarded any due democratic process. A project to this day that few people want and no one needs. £4.5 million. I'd like you to think of all the other things you could spend £4.5 million on. Education, all those textbooks for schools, social care, public transport. There are now people in Thornbury who have less public transport than before the closure and less access to the high street. There are many more. Yet today, you are considering whether to spend £4.5 million so that the likes of me, on a nice day in the summer, the dozen or so days of the year when the sun shines, can sit in the middle of the road and have a posh coffee. At a time when people are struggling to afford the most basic necessities in life, are you really going to sign off £4.5 million on a project that has consistently been shown to be flawed and that the vast majority of the people of Thornbury have continually demonstrated they don't want, so that I can have a posh coffee or a pint of beer sat in the road? To my way of thinking, in the current economic and political climate, that would be utterly shameful and disgraceful and arrogant stain on local democracy by a council that seems to think we are here to serve them, not the other way around. This should be an easy decision, councillors. You can either turn down this vanity project and spend a bit of the £4.5 million returning Thornbury High Street to how it was pre-COVID, and perhaps properly ask the people of the town how they would like some of the cash spent, and use the rest for much needier causes in tough times. Or you can sign it off so that I can have my coffee in the road, yet many disabled people without cars can't access that road, Traffic in the surrounding roads is more busy and dangerous than it ever was. Our retained firefighters take longer to get to call-outs, and vital shops and businesses pack up and leave, as they're already doing, with 30% less footfall that makes them unsustainable. It's a choice, councillors, you can either be proud of or ashamed of. It's your call. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. The next person, I think, is Chris Tippett. Is Chris here, please?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm at the back here. I'm basing this statement on the government document entitled Creating Resilient and Revitalised High Streets in the New Normal. I maintain the consultation process was flawed, incomplete, and did not follow a democratic process. The consultation time was reduced to 10 minutes for each appointment, where most of the time was taken up by South Gloucestershire Council representatives telling each resident who managed to make an appointment what was going to happen to the high street. There were insufficient appointments available for the majority of Thornbury residents, especially those who were working when the limited consultation timetable was drawn up. The business owners and local residents' comments and genuine concerns were ignored by South Gloucestershire Council. South Gloucestershire Council did not realise Thornbury High Street could not be compared to other high street closures in South Gloucestershire because it does not have more than one relief road, called Rock Street, to cope with the extra traffic generated from closure of the high street. The elderly and the less mobile who used to use the bus to access the bus stop on the high street have complained they are unable to conveniently access the shops on the high street. So now they prefer to go by bus to Yates Shopping Centre. In one fell swoop, South Gloucestershire Council have stopped passing trade in the high street, which was part of the lifeblood supporting local businesses. The high street closure plans proposed are based on the false assumption we in the UK are part of a newly formed cafe society where we attempt to create areas on the high street where people can sit outside to eat and drink. This system is completely unsustainable between September and March, leading to scenes reminiscent of a ghost town. Businesses can no longer benefit from passing vehicle trade. This trade was vital to the survival of the businesses located on the high street. My contention is South Gloucestershire Council have not prepared an in-depth examination of the performance of the high street when it was open to traffic pre-COVID and compared it to the data from a survey carried out after the forced closure of the high street. They would then have evidence of whether the closure had actually benefited local businesses. Have the changes improved traffic problems? Definitely not. Has there been a social benefit for Thornbury residents? Well, less people are visiting the high street, except on the Saturdays when there's a street market. The main aim of any high street reorganisation should be to maintain or increase footfall during the day and evening. The present plans allow for 2 dropping-off points limited to 10 minutes. This situation is being abused daily by drivers who pretend they need to access a drop-off point, but instead drive up the high street to gain access to Tesco's or Ulverston Hill. Until South Gloucestershire properly consult owners of businesses and Thornbury residents about the proposed plans for changing our high street, the grant should be withheld. In-depth traffic surveys, including pollution level changes before and after the high street was forcibly closed, should be part of the business plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tibbets. Is Gil, I met Gil, so Gil's here. Gilroy, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Wecker. Thornbury High Street. I'm a Thornbury resident for 43 years. We all know by now that the vast majority of Thornbury residents are strongly opposed to Councillor Savage's vision and destruction of a market town high street, 72%. In the wake of these changes, a high percentage, some 20% of Thornbury residents are and will be forever denied the opportunity to shop or visit the high street ever again. These are the bread and butter shoppers who kept our high street alive and kicking. If this comes as a surprise to you, well, it's because no data had been collected prior to the decision to proceed with the vision and closure by South Gloucestershire Cabinet, who voted for it. They were voting blindfolded. Shame on you. Your job in public office is to protect your electorate and fight for democracy, none of which has been followed by Councillor Savage's vision. No good will come from burying your head in the sand and hoping for the best. These decisions should be considered from data and facts taken from a proper, fair and honest consultation with impact studies. The residents of Thornbury conducted their own consultations and impact studies, and before you ask, yes, by professionals. It was a fair and honest consultation with all stakeholders, the community, and especially with the businesses in the high street. The conclusions of the consultation were given to Councillor Savage and the other council leaders prior to and again at the WECA meeting on the 27th of February 2022. They have also been circulated by every South Gloucestershire council and is publicly available online. And please do not insult our intelligence by quoting Atkins to replicate the output values stated in the economic appraisal of the OBC or business plan. The extent of these errors and misrepresentations contained within the OBC and business plan are now apparent, and their consequent impact on the present value benefit PVB claimed within the economic appraisal. The document is heavily weighted in favour of Councillor Savage's vision of closing Thornbury High Street. There are so many more negative impacts that this closure will cause on business, health, traffic, safety, emergency services, and of course, the huge negative impact on the lives of 20% of Thornbury residents. How would you like your mother or father denied the democratic right to shop in Thornbury High Street? Many blue badge holders will be denied on a daily basis. Others, young and old, who suffer with a disability will be denied to shop in the high street forever, unable to walk very far with a disability and with breathing difficulties, especially on the high street slope. I implore you to reconsider. Think of people first and retain our high street businesses before it's too late. Please do not continue with this vision, just to save face and hope for the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilroy. Is Mr. Kay Woosnam here, please? Kay Woosnam? Woosnam, beg your pardon, sir.
Some of this is repetitive, I'm afraid. I've lived and operated my business in and around Thornbury for almost 50 years. I brought my family up there as well. I believe that my knowledge and experience of my town, its character, community and daily life far exceeds that of those who do not live, work or contribute in any way to the life of our local communities. Specifically, the supporters of this funding application, South Gloss Council, and their paid consultants, none of whom have any personal or direct knowledge of the life of our town. I support all of the points raised in objection previously by DRA, but see no purpose served by further rehearsing in detail those highly cogent arguments. I confine my submission to one issue only: failure of the council to enact the clearly stated will of the people to reopen our high street following extraordinary powers that allowed for the temporary closure during unprecedented COVID-19 virus public control measures. This was enacted with such speed that it was totally and utterly impossible to first carry out the most basic of background studies, such as air pollution, traffic numbers, high street footfall, business turnovers, parking use, numbers of elderly people and the disabled using local transport to the high street, etc. So subsequent contentions by the council in support of its clearly stated desire to permanently close the high street were totally without any evidential foundations, relying upon guesswork, averages and theories by third parties, and as such were fatally flawed. To quote Mark Twain, "First get your facts, then you can distort them as you please." The council had already decided that this closure should become permanent, a premature decision based without supporting evidence on a theory of a small and vociferous minority, only then seeking consultation of Thornbury residents. Local consultation responses showed a large majority supported reinstatement of the high street to pre-pandemic use. The council ignored this result as it did not align with their vision. Angered and frustrated, local businesses previously ignored and local residents formed several groups to influence the council decisions. All protests and requests for true and meaningful public engagement fell upon deaf ears. There are none as deaf as those who do not wish to hear. Resulting from continual contempt for their views of the residents group arranged for a local Thornbury Town Parish Council referendum held under personal supervision of the council's own returning officer. Given the short time available and without access to the voting register, the organisers did a magnificent job in mobilising a turnover of over 24% of the entire voting community. That was in 5 days. Subsequently, the council chose to ignore the results of this democratic voting process because 72% voted to reinstate its original pre-pandemic position. Only 52% of people voted in the national referendum to leave the EU, and we left the EU. That's democracy. Also bear in mind that the real catchment area for Thornbury High Street services and facilities includes surrounding districts incorporating over twice the number of residents. So currently greater than 25,000 people are affected by any changes to our high street. The council has a clear duty of care. All changes made should result in a beneficial investment, improving the quality of the lives of those people and communities who are directly affected by their actions and upon whom results those changes will fall. Can you in all conscience decide that ignoring the results of that democratic referendum decision of the residents is irrelevant? And if you decide funding should be awarded to carry out this unwarranted vandalism of our high street, then you will also be complicit in the burial of the concept of public democracy and local community engagement. Please remember, there are none as blind as those who choose not to see, and please think very hard before you act, because all actions have consequences. Please refuse to approve this destructive funding application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woosnam. Sue Black. Is Sue Black here, please? Sue.
Hello, it's Sue Blick.
Blick, sorry, Sue.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair, Councillors and Committee. My name is Sue Blick and I am really concerned about the impact of the Thornbury High Street changes for our disabled and less abled residents and visitors. The committee should be aware of some unresolved issues before agreeing to the funding. How can monies be provided for a scheme when the final design is still evolving? Blue badge parking. South Gloucestershire Council's original plan had only 6 blue badge spaces. In version 3, there have been 2 extra added with the promise of another in September. However, the 9 spaces were decided before anyone from the council had checked to see how many blue badges had been issued within an 8-mile radius of the high street. I asked back in February and was told in March that I couldn't be given the answer because of data protection. However, As part of the Accessibility and Equality Focus Group, I asked again, and in June was advised by Verity Britain that 752 badges had been issued within BS35. That number does not include BS32 Almondsbury or GL12 Fowlfield or any other villages where the residents come to use our high street to do their shopping. How can the council justify only 9 spaces in the high street, now knowing that 752 badge holders live in BS35 alone? 9 spaces represent just over 1% of potential disabled high street users. Dropping off points. On the focus group, I have tried with others to get some help for those like me without a blue badge access to our high street. In January 22, the council eventually allowed people to be dropped off in 2 or 3 specific bays. However, we're only allowed 10 minutes for that, and a rule not allowing to be picked up again within 2 hours. These need to be amended. High street impact. It is very important for the council and Mr. Toby Savage in particular to realise the detrimental impact of the changes to our high street and how it is affecting the daily lives of so many people. I have totally lost my high street independence. Since June 2020, I haven't been allowed to drive myself to my own high street and park, shop or meet friends. Because of their decision, I have to rely on my husband to drop me off or feel forced to see friends somewhere else. The disabled are supposed to be protected in law. The less able-bodied should also matter. Not all of us have visible health issues. I have attended public meetings where local stroke survivors and cancer patients who don't have a blue badge have explained that they can't use the high street as they did before because of the distance they are expected to walk from car parks. They become breathless and sometimes dizzy. We all feel more isolated from our Thornbury community. Consultation. Despite what Toby Savage says publicly, we, Thornbury, were not consulted at the beginning of this process. Bad initial plans were drawn up with apparently little local knowledge, and many of these issues could have been avoided. Only after the high street closure did South Gloucestershire Council realise that there were issues and late in the process started to consult. However, as part of the Accessibility and Equality Focus Group that I belong to, I feel that although a few things seem to have been taken on board as a result of our meetings, some of the original ideas in version 1 are still being bulldozed through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue, very much for that. Andy Chubb is next. Andy.
Hi, I live in Albury on 7. I'm affected by the high street because it affects my accessibility to get to the town. So I've done this bit on what I see has happened. So what have I learned since Thornbury South Gloss announced on the 3rd of June to close our high street? Simply, South Gloss will implement its own vision of Thornbury High Street regardless of clear and significant objection from the local and surrounding communities. A consultation that reported only 29% of respondents supported this scheme. Recent local poll recorded 72 objection to it. That's the most recent one. A clear reduction in retail activity on the high street. The congestion on Rock Street, Midland Way and Quaker Road. The number of road accidents that have occurred since the 8th of June on Rock Street and continue to occur. The dangerous position of the bus stop on Rock Street. The objection of the Chamber of Commerce. And today, again, 38 submissions of the 42 of today's meeting objecting to the scheme. That's 92%. So what else have I learned? Toby Savage has stated he has support for the scheme in the Thornbury Gazette article, but stated that people were afraid to support in public for fear of reprisals. This is absolute rubbish. Online consult questionnaire respondents clearly rejected the scheme. A most recent count, again, of the political poll was 72% against it. A point of note is, in the consultation, there was an open text box, question 13, asking for any other comment on the scheme. And of that, the members of the people who responded put in 170,000 words of comment that have never made the light of day, the vast majority objecting to the scheme. It's worth noting that the full business case and the consultation report word count is only 103,000. None of the Cabinet made any comment on the 56 submissions to the 7th of June 2021 Cabinet meeting objecting to the scheme when discussing this item. Steve Reed revealed on the 3rd of June 2020 the full plan that South Gloss intend to implement and have continued to. So why did South Gloucestershire close the High Street? It's clear that South Gloucestershire did not close the High Street to enable social distancing as claimed. The day following the closure of the High Street in a virtual meeting with Thornbury Town Council, minutes record Mark King, Head of Street Care and Transport, stating that it exploring the idea of having markets on the High Street. The ETRO decision reference ECS 5720 used to extend the closure for up to 18 months stated removal of the scheme was not viable as it was needed to enable social distancing. Yet they organised a fair on the High Street not a month later, I think it was. I'm going to skip to the end. So it's clear that the driver of keeping the High Street closed that South Gloucester used was social distancing. Yet 2 months later, sorry, I'm going to repeat this, organised an event on the High Street encouraging a mass gathering and introducing a fortnightly market later on. South Gloss is requesting final funding from the scheme on Thornbury High Street through the Economic Development Fund. And at today's meeting, after submitting a full business case on the 13th of May, the full business case delivered by Atkins on South Gloucestershire's behalf could be described as a desktop exercise. It in no way reflects Thornbury High Street and the surrounding area today. The document sets out the reference case as a basis of the scheme will improve on and deliver economic benefits. So to any resident, this would have mean pre-COVID High Street. To South Gloss and Atkins, a point in July when the High Street was in its temporary ETRO status with people working from home and shielding was still widespread. South Gloss conducted 2 counts, one on a weekday and one on a weekend day. Never in any profession would this be deemed as meaningful data. Typically 3 separate data points are required to indicate any trends. This sort of inappropriate approach has been taken out throughout the document. The document itself is so far out of date with the current situation, it is very strange that between January and now, Atkins have not added an addendum noting changes since the outline case was submitted in January. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chubb, and thank you to all the other speakers. Is there anybody who was expecting to speak or wanting to speak who I haven't called who's here today, please? Now's your time to put your hand up. Okay, thank you very, very much indeed. Well, look, thank you to everyone who's submitted a statement today. All those comments have been noted, and where they relate to agenda items, they will be taken into account by the committee today. 44 statements were issued on the issue of Thornbury High Street, and thank you to all those people of those who've come and travelled all the way from the north of the west of England right down to the south of the west of England. You obviously feel very strongly about this, and thank you to the 2 other people who put in about other subjects, so thank you very much. People probably know my view on this, but it seems very important to me that politicians need to make sure there's full, fair and respectful consultation on any issues, particularly like this. And I give great praise to all those involved in the parish poll because I think it was an important exercise. Okay, thank you very much indeed. In that case, we now move on to item 7, comments from the chair of the Local Enterprise Partnership, Richard Bonner. Richard, would you like to speak now, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to talk to a couple of items. I think the second item on the agenda around the Joint Committee Governance Review, is that being withdrawn? Thank you. So I'll speak first to the first agenda item, which is LEP and the IBB budget outturn for the year up to March 2022. That budget report highlights how the region continues to benefit from many of the funds that are overseen by the Local Enterprise Partnership. I do, however, note that there are a number of delays actually in the way in which some of those funds are developed through the GBF, the Get Building Fund, and the Economic Development Fund projects. However, these are all very important for the transport and infrastructure schemes that benefit residents across the region, and I'm keen to ensure that we don't lose momentum, that these are delivered within the appropriate timetables. I'm also pleased to see that we're able to continue to use our funds flexibly to ensure that time-limited funding like the GBF is fully utilised and that schemes remain funded. And I think to a point where we made in the previous meeting, a number of those schemes that are funded are of significance to the region. Things like Metro West, Metrobus, the Avon and Severn side flood scheme and the works at Temple Island are all critical to our ongoing economic development. I'd also just like to say a few words about the impact that we have through our inward investment team, IBB, in so much that I received, along with the Mayor, a letter a couple of days ago from the Department for International Trade that assesses the impact on much of what happens around foreign direct investment into the UK. And the letter from the Minister, and I'll quote just briefly, despite the global economic challenges, the UK remains one of the most attractive places in the world to invest. And actually our region secured 29 FDI investments and 14 which were across multiple regions, and that led to over 1,000 jobs in that particular financial year. And I think it's important that we continue to support our team who make a big impact for promoting the region. Just very briefly on the second agenda item, which is the governance review. We spoke at previous meetings around the work of ensuring that we have a working group for the local enterprise partnership as it looks to its transition. That group has met on 2 or 3 occasions. We are in the process of waiting for some further clarity from government in terms of exactly what they expect of us. And I was at a LEP network meeting on Monday where we were in discussions with Neil O'Brien, the Minister, and relevant civil servants. And there are some delays to that process, so we're not yet quite clear exactly where all of that is going, Mayor. But the general consensus is that we want to continue to have a very strong voice of business that helps to shape the strategy around our economic development and to make sure that we make the case for those major investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Winston, item 8 is comments from Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which you chair, of course. I don't know if you wish to make any comments now.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chair. We haven't got any specific comments on the LEP and IPP budget outturn. We have tended to concentrate on the Joint Committee Governance Review. We've done a lot of work since the last meeting. So the fact that it's been withdrawn, I've got mixed views on, because the Scrutiny Committee is clear about the relationship outcome it wants to happen, and those of our all-party steering group are even more clear as a result of what we've done in the last 5 or 6 weeks. And indeed, we're grateful to Councillor Savage, who came up with the suggestion that we use a task and finish group approach. And it's given us greater clarity in terms of the steering group that we've put together. And it's clear that the Levelling Up White Paper seeks to give more power, not to the Metro Mayor, but to the combined authority. That's the direction of travel. And that's an important nuance. We see the idea of changing the standard orders of the Joint Committee as an opportunity. In fact, in our first meeting, we took only 10 minutes to agree the outcome that we wanted. And that was a clear purpose for the JC going forward, with appropriate standing orders that complements the CA committee and demonstrates collaborative working and co-production, which in turn will enable the region to go forward as one to government and to other stakeholders. It was a good month before the publication of what is perhaps quite a new document that will change a lot of the thinking on how combined authorities go forward. It's a produce of the Institute of Government, and they've looked in detail at the 9 combined authorities up and down the country. They've left London out of the equation. And it's been endorsed in principle by both Michael Gove and Andy Burnham, although they don't agree with all 26 recommendations. They agree with the general direction of travel. I was part of that consultation as Chair of Scrutiny, and I'm going up to a meeting on July the 12th, which is on Chatham House rules up at in London to discuss it in more details, particularly to look at the scrutiny and how we can make scrutiny more robust. So what it gives us a clear steer of what is working in combined authorities. First of all, it's pretty important to have an economic region that makes sense. And in certain other combined authorities, it doesn't necessarily. Only with 2, but the other 7 it does. But the success, Chair, of the model depends heavily on the leadership qualities of the Metro Mayor. And let me just give you 3 quotes which give you the direction of travel. And I will send the link through to everybody, but it's only 70 pages, so it's not a huge document. Not a huge document by the standards of what we look at before these meetings. But it is it's a really good read, because it makes you want to reflect or back on what works here, and what doesn't work here. Now, with North Somerset, I believe we've got an economic region that more than makes sense. We've got the whole deal. It's up to us, and particularly the leadership team on the combined authority, to really make it happen. But let me give you 3 of these quotes. Metro mayors hold the power of the pen and can vote, and can veto, but there is relatively little they can do without building consensus on the combined authority. This is looking at all 9. Metro mayors must lead by persuasion and negotiation. They are not powerful exec figures like a US city mayor, but first amongst equals on the MCAs they chair. On most issues, they cannot act without the consent of council leaders. And finally, and take this as a positive, character really matters, far more than most political roles, and character is more important than political affiliation. And that's just a flavour of the potential that we have if we get it right. So I will do whatever I can in my role, and our committee will, in terms of getting this relationship right going forward, based on that premise and based on that outcome that we want. The glass is more than half full if we take this opportunity, and the evidence is in this document. And you know, one of the most successful is a smaller MCA than us, up in Teesside, where a Conservative mayor has got 6 local authorities, 3 of which I think, most of which are controlled by either Labour controlled authorities or independent controlled authorities. And yet there is a one authority approach to everything and a determination to succeed. So I'm very optimistic, and I want to spend the next few weeks getting this right and bringing back this revised standing orders with that objective, because there's a lot for us to do and a lot of opportunities, and there will be money forthcoming that we simply must use to make the best for our region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Winston. Appreciate that. Okay, we now move to the reports before us today, and firstly is item 9, the Local Enterprise Partnership and Invest Bristol and Bath Budget Outturn April to March. This report sets out a series of recommendations, including the noting of the LEP outturn position for the year and approvals for the business case and change requests. I know some of these, like Thornbury High Street, are of huge public interest, as we've seen again today. As close followers of these meetings will know, I do not have a vote, as you will be aware, on that particular issue, but I have long called for a full, fair and respectful consultation. Would someone like to move the recommendations, please, as set out in the report?
Chair, are we taking all of the recommendations on block, or are we doing them one at a time?
I'm going to take them in turn, so...
happy to second them all.
All right, if you could second the general thing, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Toby. Sorry, I wanted a proposer. Sorry, I said seconded, did I? I want a proposer. Can I have a proposer in general? Sorry, but my apologies. Long day. Thank you very much, Toby. You proposed and seconded. Is that it? Okay, let's move on. Okay, right, can I now call for a seconder, please, in general? Thanks, Marvin. Appreciate that. Okay, right. Does anybody wish to... keeps going off. Does anybody wish to speak to this item, please? Thank you, Toby.
Chair, thank you. So in proposing the report, I'll welcome it broadly, but will comment specifically on the full business case item for Thornbury High Street. And can I just start off by thanking all those residents who have made the journey over today, and then those who have spoken at today's meeting. There have been a number of recurring issues within the submissions, so I'll try to direct some comments on some broad themes. Firstly, and these are comments I've made previously, I do recognise that this is a controversial scheme in Thornbury, and that there are a range of strong views. From the outset, though, we have sought to encourage views and to see what changes we can make to the scheme, and we are able to show a very clear trail of consultation and engagement at various stages of the project. And that consultation and engagement has been, some of it has involved myself, some of it has involved fellow cabinet members, and some of it has involved officers of the council as well, because we have wanted to find out the views of the town and to understand how we can reconcile those views with the need to address long-standing issues that don't just affect Thornbury High Street, but affect all of our high streets. And it's important to say that as we have moved our way through those different stages of consultation and engagement, the scheme has changed as well. So it started off life as a full pedestrianisation, brought in as we moved out of the first COVID lockdown, and has since evolved. So, for example, it does now include dedicated blue badge parking. I accept that there is a debate about how much is included, but it's important to say that the high street as it was didn't have any dedicated blue badge parking. And one of the speakers has referred to actually how that figure has changed over the lifetime of the scheme. But I do accept that there is still some disagreements as to what that final number is. But I use it as an example actually of how the scheme has changed as time has gone on. Ultimately, what we want for Thornbury High Street and for all of our high streets is to set them up for the future, that allows them to thrive into the future, and that addresses the structural challenges that face them. The main one being online shopping, and how the statistics show that there already pre-COVID was a rising trend in online shopping, and that the pandemic has significantly accelerated that trend, and it shows no signs of reversing. But there are also other priorities that we have as a region that we need to work with our communities to be able to address, and that includes active travel and improving how we are able to get around the district, get around the region, get around our communities by improving walking and cycling options, and how we address the challenge of climate change and the emergency actions that we have to take around that, and then also around green infrastructure and how we can improve planting and improve biodiversity within our public spaces. So all of those priorities feed into the work that we have been doing on Thornbury High Street for a number of years now. The outline business case that came to this committee in January had unanimous approval, and that allowed us to move forward with the full business case stage. The project was then included within the council's capital programme in February, and important to say that was subject to a unanimous vote of the council. In fact, actually, in terms of council budgets, it has been some years since there was unanimous approval for council budgets, and yet we had that approval in February. And then before us today is the full business case, which at 300 pages long goes through all of the aspects. Sorry, there's some feedback there. So I'll continue, Chair. Okay, thank you. I'll try and keep the microphone on just to help with those who do struggle with hearing. I think I was just commenting on the full business case. So obviously it's set out within the papers and over 300 pages long. It goes through each of the aspects of the scheme that is right and proper to do as part of a project like this, and does address a number of the areas of concern that people had at the outline business case stage. Now, that has obviously been through its full assurance assessment by West of England officers that all projects have to go through when they come before us, whether they are coming to the committee or the joint committee. And we very much encourage colleagues to vote for it today. I think it's important to say that within this, there are investments set out for the wider town centre, so not simply focused around the high street itself. So, for example, improving the condition of both Rock Street and St Mary's Street car parks. This also complements wider investment that the council is making in Thornbury, very significant investment. That includes £16 million to improve.
Sorry to interrupt, Toby, just point of order. I'm not quite sure how things operate in South Gloucestershire, but in Bath and North East Somerset, if somebody's speaking, then they are to be given the due respect they're speaking. Councillor Savage did not interrupt anybody else, so I would appreciate it, through the chair, you get a grip and take control of the meeting. Thank you very much.
So the point I was making around this particular project and this particular investment at £4.5 million, setting that out in the wider context of investment that the council and partners are making into the town, and that includes £16 million to improve the condition of local schools, focused around Marlwood and Castle School. Again, long-standing challenges that have faced the town for many years. And then also the action that the council has taken, working with partners to facilitate a new health centre in the town, which includes the purchasing of the hospital site. So set within that broader context, there is some very significant investment going into the town that seeks to address each of the challenges that it faces. And I think, Chair, I would draw my comments to a close at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toby, and I'm sorry there was feedback, because that is very difficult to speak when that's happening. Okay, right. Now, does anybody else wish to speak to this, please? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief, very general point, because obviously I don't know the scheme in huge detail. So just a quick point, really, which is that I think we need to decouple business performance from the car. I think that's really important. That probably won't land that well with many people in the room, but I think obviously we need also really good public transport. We discussed in the previous meeting about a really ambitious public transport plan with really ambitious sort of fare reduction schemes to increase patronage on public transport. But I think, these sorts of schemes are entirely in line with government policy, actually. But I just finish where I began, that I think it's really important that we decouple business performance from the car, and people always having to drive to shops. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Richard.
Just to make the point that we have a process to follow, and I think whilst there's a lot of passion in the room, there's a lot of business to get through today, and I'd like us to move forward with the business in the usual process, please.
Thank you, Richard. Let's move to those recommendations in turn then, please. The first recommendation is a noting only recommendation, and that's number 1, notes the revised analysis of the LEP external grants as at the end of March 2022 as set out in figure 1. Are those noted, please? Thank you very much indeed. Then recommendation 2 notes that the LEP revenue outturn as set out in appendix 1. Is that noted, please? Thank you very much. Recommendation 3 approves the full business case for the Thornbury High Street project and the award of £4.557 million through the Economic Development Fund. This is a vote which I do not have a vote in. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, and then recommendation 4, approve the change of requests for schemes in the local growth and Getting Building Fund programmes as set out in appendix 2. All those in favour, please show now. Marvin, are you with us? Sorry, hold the vote again a moment. Sorry, Marvin, you were distracted then. We're on recommendation 4. I'm asking for all this to show in favour to show now, please. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. And then recommendation 5, to approve the change requests for schemes in the Economic Development and Revolving Infrastructure Fund programmes as set out in appendix 3. For all those in favour, please show now. Okay, that's 4 votes. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, we now move to item 10, the Joint Committee Governance Review. Now, I've heard reference to the fact that this might be withdrawn, so obviously I'm all ears waiting to hear. So, first of all, I'll just ask, is someone prepared to propose this report, please? Toby.
Chair, thank you. So I won't be proposing to move the report. I'll instead be proposing that we defer the report. And if I could just make some comments around why I'm proposing that. It is in relation to the Scrutiny Commission's recommendations that were recently circulated to us earlier in the week. I think we need more time collectively to consider those and to give them proper consideration. And as we heard from Winston earlier, very much welcome the work that the Task and Finish group have done to really try to zoom in on some of the issues that we're grappling with. So for those reasons, Chair, I'd like to propose that we defer this item, and as unitary authorities, we will come back with a new date for the Joint Committee to consider this item in due course once we have had those collective discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Toby. You propose withdrawing the report. I take it that's shared by other people as well. Steve, come on in.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, really, on whether we're talking about a withdrawal or a deferral. I think that they're actually two different things. The point I wanted to make really was, there are things I certainly agree with in the in the review. My issue is with the timing, because obviously this process kicked off, forgive me if I get this wrong, but last December, before I came onto this particular scene. And obviously there are discussions taking place, particularly around the future of the LEP, which are quite fluid, and that will need its own governance around that. So I'm unsure that actually discussing this, even discussing it in the next cycle would give us enough time to actually take on, have the conversation that would be required given the change of circumstances, potentially in a few months' time.
Thank you very much, Steve. So, Toby, it's a deferment. Okay, let's be clear about that. Okay, in that case, that concludes our business for today, and the meeting is closed. Thank you for everyone who's attended, especially those who've travelled a long way today. Thank you.